Thank you for joining today to Revolutionizing Life Sciences Manufacturing with Digital Technologies. This is the last section of the Microsoft and Tulip webinar series. Throughout the series, you've heard from different insights from industry experts on how to drive innovation with cloud-based solutions for life sciences manufacturing. So definitely we'll be sending something later at the end of the webinars to check in on that All Up series to see if you guys would like to learn anything further for the on-demand version. All right, to do some brief introductions, we have Yuri Gomez, head at Microsoft, who's the head of commercial strategy and sales processing industries. Yuri is the Global Chief Commercial and Strategy Officer for Process Manufacturing Industry Division at Microsoft. She leads the GTM strategy and sales execution for process industries, including chemicals, steel, pulp and paper, pharmaceuticals, and others. She drives end-to-end digital transformation for Fortune 100 companies and many more working with engineering, sales, and partner teams. Yuri has over 2 decades of industry experience. Before joining Microsoft, she worked for Johnson & Johnson, Solvay, and various startups where she had multiple leadership roles, leading innovation, manufacturing, E2E supply chain, commercial operations, and mergers and acquisitions. Now I'd like to introduce you to Greg Willis, a senior manufacturing engineering manager at Teladoc Health. Greg Willis is the Senior Manufacturing Engineer for Teladoc Health, and he leads multiple technical groups in Goleta, California, and in Dallas, Texas, who supports multiple manufacturing in both locations. Focused on driving lean initiatives at both locations, he enables sustainable growth and efficiency for a variety of manufacturing operations. Greg also has over 2 decades of experience in production environment and almost 2 decades of sales experience. Before Teladoc Health, Greg worked for a variety of companies, both large and small, such as Aero Electronics, SBIR, and InTouch Health. And now I'd like to also introduce Rachel Shaw. She's the customer service manager at Tulip. She has worked primarily with younger companies who are ramping up their manufacturing process across both discrete manufacturing and life sciences, helping them to achieve digital transformation goals using Tulip. Before joining Tulip, Rachel worked in operations, marketing, and product management across the Halma group of companies, where she focused on combining classic lean methodologies and modern process in order to achieve operational excellence. And now I'd like to hand it over to Rachel to get us started.
Awesome. Thanks, Heather. So in this session, we are going to really focus in on quality and how we can best achieve it. It's something that we know is important to meet regulatory and meet our compliance requirements, but also, and more importantly, the reliable and consistent manufacturing that's really key to ensuring our health and our safety outcomes. So Yuri, I want to ask you the first question, which is, at a high level, what are some of the trends that you're seeing across life sciences customers related to quality and digital transformation?
Thank you, Rachel. And well, that's a great question to start with. I think life sciences and other process manufacturing industries are pressured with a lot of paper-based work or semi-digitized work. These customers are actually seeing a lot of wasted value from lost productivity, redundant tasks, and rework. Some customers are actually inundated with paper from standard operating procedures, whether that is for executional work, for batch processing, or equipment and asset calibration, or regulatory reviews. Their people are simply spending too much time with paper and glass on paper documentation. On another hand, some customers have started their digitization journey by getting data behind the glass or pretty much in a computer format. But many times, Rachel, what I say is that the software they use is static and it's not smart. So they can't really drive meaningful insights from that data. And the only way to process, to really process that data is to manually review it, to print it, to extract it, and, and then organize it into whatever, formats or reports they need. That is too time consuming, and manufacturers now realize they can do better. So what I see is that customers that are leading in the digital journey are reaping the benefits from low-code automation and workflow digitization, which is also powered by video and vision capabilities. When they create all of these intelligent automation workflows, their people are reporting noticeable increase in productivity, for example, huge improvements in quality compliance, because evidently operators make less error. Also, like they can do faster decision making, because if you really think about it, then operational data can be quickly accessed and processed for intelligent insights, and they can also do faster decision making. And one immediate benefit that is clear is people taking other responsibilities in the shop floor, and even plant managers meeting their on-time production schedule, getting product out the door faster because now they can have more rapid product release cycles. So to me, all of those really are the critical trends, and combined with all the challenges that pharmaceuticals are facing, and medical devices as well, and how really the power of bringing digital innovation is solving for these critical pain points, Rachel.
Yeah, okay. We're gonna dive into a lot of that as we keep going, but before really getting into it and talking about what that looks like on the ground for Teledoc, Greg, Teledoc, I think, is a company that a lot of us associate with telehealth, but here we're talking about manufacturing. Could you share a little bit about what manufacturing actually looks like at Teledoc?
Sure. Um, Teladoc, a few years back, bought a couple of companies, InTouch Health and Livongo, and that was in an attempt to try to create the continuum of care from beginning of the episode until the end. An example of what we do in manufacturing at Teledoc is in the health and systems hospitals. We make robots or machines that allow very high-end audio video communication. That allows a doctor remotely to look at the patient and determine what needs to be done to the patient. A good example of that was in Michigan, where we really got our first foothold into the market. Michigan State has a really good neurology department. So we put units that allowed this communication out into the clinics, remote clinics. So one of the first things that we discovered was there's a drug called TPA that when you have a stroke, and it's a clot stroke, there's two types of stroke, where it's a hemorrhage stroke or a clot stroke. TPA breaks down that clot very effectively if it's administered in a quick time before it gets too congested in the vein. So what we were able to do is from Michigan State, look at the patient out in those remote clinics through our machine, determine that the doctor at the clinic location could administer TPA based on the prognosis of the patient. And TPA breaks that clot down very quickly. So the patient is not needed to be transported into Michigan State, which is the old way it would be done. That time that it takes to transport the patient to Michigan State, they're losing brain because in stroke situations, time is brain. So that allowed the patient the next day to go play dominoes with their grandkids, as opposed to having to learn how to walk a couple days later. So it avoided that transport time and really created a situation where we were able to help a lot of patients. Another example of where it's being used is with psych patients. So instead of putting the doctor in the room, they'll put one of our robots in the room, and that will allow the doctor not to be hit. We actually do get robots back with screens that have been hit by the patient. So that's really not that uncommon, unfortunately. Another example was the first patient who had COVID in Seattle. They actually put one of our units in the room with the patient so that the nurses would not have to continue to go in. That allowed them to monitor the patient remotely and not have to expose the nurses to the COVID. When I first started 13 years, I've been with the company for a while now, we were producing a robot a week. Currently, we're producing about 600 to 700 a month. So there's been a significant increase in our output. And in order to do that efficiently, one of the things that we moved to was Tulip about 3, 4 years ago.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. I love all of those examples. And I think looking at COVID, that last example that you gave specifically, we all remember how quickly we all needed to ramp up everything that we were doing, especially for this kind of monitoring applications. So that I'm guessing was really, really incredible to be a part of. And it seems, we're seeing this as we work with you at Tulip, as you've integrated this digitization work more and more, you've really been able to see significant productivity gains. Yuri, I wanted to ask you, across the life sciences companies that you work with, how are you seeing digital transformation contribute to this type of productivity gain and letting companies gain value that they couldn't find otherwise?
Yeah, Rachel, thank you again. So I think, just to piggyback here on what Greg mentioned, right? It's interesting because when you think about a company like Teledoc, you would always think like, well, it's just a company that provides teleservices, to allow the platform of communication between the doctor and the patient. But then you forget about really, like companies evolve, right? And many times companies either offer a service or also start making product, right? But when you start making product, of course, now you are faced with another level of complexity that is very different when you are a service provider. And the level of complexity, then, of course, now you have to deal with operations on the floor, production, supply chain, making sure that, I'm sure Greg, providing those remote monitoring and making your robots at a fast speed, agility, making sure your patients and doctors and hospitals have that technology they need at the right time. So when it comes to your question, Rachel, about productivity, clearly life sciences companies are highly regulated. And this high level of regulation brings a lot of complexity and demand to keep up with documentation activities in the production floor, the quality team, or even in research and operation departments. Now, if we just think about in the non-digitized scenario, people have to spend countless hours documenting data. The review and approval process of this alone, of all of this data, is too long and tedious. And sometimes what I've seen is that it can take up to a full week on average to release the product to market. So now you can imagine the ton of time wasted there. Then we have to also look for those customers that actually have embraced digital innovation for their quality and plant transformation. They are unlocking operational visibility across all processes and assets, and most importantly, their people. So their productivity is being accelerated and unblocked because now frontline workers and operators, whether they're scientists or even your warehouse operators and other types of folks, they can now focus on the task at hand without worrying about human errors. And that's really big. So the company can now only can evidently rely now on a trusted platform that can guide the operator with confidence, with clarity on each action that needs to be taken and done. And this is just the beginning because companies are going beyond their four walls to maximize impact. And that's what I'm seeing. They are scaling these solutions across multiple plants and geographies, unleashing a new wave of creative collaboration that can't really be achieved when you go with manual processes. So that to me, Rachel, is really how I believe companies, where they are medical companies, the medical clients that I talk to, or the pharmaceutical companies, and beyond across all the other industries that I work with, productivity is a huge gain. And just those were just some highlights on what I'm seeing.
Absolutely. And Greg, I'm going to just toss it right back over to you because I know that you're seeing a lot of these benefits that Yuri just mentioned. What would you say are some of the key advantages to digitizing with Tulip, especially around moving from paper to electronic device history records?
It's a good question. We recently had a situation where we were building a system that had an off-the-shelf camera. The supplier changed the firmware, and with off-the-shelf product, you usually aren't informed of this. So we started having problems out in the field, and customers were complaining. And one of our largest customers actually stopped taking product because of the issue. So in the old days, we would have started looking through paper travelers, which is a really challenging, time-consuming, and not a particularly efficient approach. Some of my MEs were able to look at the digital file, looked at the serial numbers of the cameras that were coming in, and realized that the first instance of complaint from a customer, there was a new serial number sequence. Instead of showing 301, it was showing 3001. And my guys have been around long enough, and they figured that that was probably a problem. So they started matching up the complaints with the serial numbers of the cameras, because they were able to access that data relatively easy because it was all digitized, and realized very quickly that they overlapped. And so we got a hold of the camera manufacturer and asked them what was up. And it turns out we found out that they made a firmware change. This allowed us to change our software so that the firmware change didn't affect the functionality of the system. And it really allowed the customer to start taking product quicker. Probably saved us, I would guess, 2 to 4 weeks. So we started getting, the customer started taking product again once we fixed the issue. So it really allowed the money to flow quicker, and was really kind of a big deal from the standpoint of they had stopped taking product for a month and a half or so, and we were starting to notice it in our numbers. So when they started taking product again, it was far quicker than it would have been if we had had to look through paper to find out what the problem was. In the digital file, it was very obvious and very recognizable that they had changed their serial number sequences. It just stood out like a sore thumb. So that was a real benefit to not only my group from getting it, getting the problem resolved, but for the customer, because they were able to start taking product again.
Yeah, I love that example. I think it hits on so much of what we're talking about. It enables your operations group to dive into the data, find answers quickly when they need it. I'm sure your business folks are happy about that as well, being able to get product to the customers. And I'm sure the customer is happy about that as well, that they can start getting these products and using these products with their patients again. And it's actually something, that type of example is something that I hear from a lot of the customers I work with, actually, both in life sciences and in discrete manufacturing, that one of the key advantages of digitization is they have a lot of data, especially quality data, and it just becomes so much easier to analyze it, to identify issues, to identify areas for improvement, whether that's in research and development, whether that is in identifying root cause of issues. And like you're saying, that comes from just being able to really effectively search digital data in a way that with paper, you just can't in the same way. So we have all of this data. Yuri, what are some of the ways that you're seeing manufacturers leverage all of that data that they have available to them?
Yeah, so it's very interesting, right? Because I think, as Greg mentioned earlier, the fact that you already go to being compliant, right, which is supremely important in any medical device life sciences company, making sure that you can actually deliver the product to your customer the way they need it, on time, very especially, and that you retain those customers, right? So I think as the great example that Greg provided is the impact that you otherwise may not realize, right? It's customer service, customer experience, and most importantly, the ability to continue to provide the medical supplies, products, or even pharmaceutical products to the patient, right? Can be really a life-saving moment. So for me, I think, Rachel, all of this data, right? Data that is generated and now is captured intelligently and in an automated fashion is leading to a lot of benefits. Data democratization and access is really changing the paradigm of quality. Workflows automation is a stepping stone. AI now actually can add additional insights, helping companies in many ways. For example, companies are now starting to realize that they have to start with accelerating their digital strategy, not only identifying all of these great pain points in manufacturing and the shop floor, but even looking into R&D operations or supply chain, especially the warehouse, right? How do you really run inventory optimization or order fulfillment processes, route optimizations? And there is opportunity huge, right? A huge opportunity to automate and do workflows and make sure, right, that you actually embed digital innovation across all of those activities. And so by unlocking all of those complexities, points, and understanding that there is opportunity for continuous improvements, then companies are now, saying we need a digital strategy, and it starts with data. And so back to your point, right? When you start unlocking innovation and putting these use cases of workflow automation, now you start generating tons of valuable data. And now that companies have, all of this, they can have better, more clear access to data. They are in the journey to evolve with more AI use cases, because as we know, that data foundation is that critical layer to enable your AI strategy, right? So like if you are thinking, for example, of, generative AI, it's a hot topic nowadays. How can you give these AI components to your people so that they can do more? But the reality is it starts with your data strategy. And when you start automating as simple as that, you start generating tons of data that now can be used to apply AI use cases, generative AI, right, to empower your worker in many more ways. And this is terrific, because with more data at the fingertips of operators and managers and the people that really need this data, life sciences and manufacturing companies, now they realize that they can democratize data for all. And then most importantly, they can encourage a culture of innovation, which is not only any type of innovation, but innovation in real time. You can actually look at your processes and then understand opportunity to really improve, right? And start automating in various use cases until one day you really see your full line and operation floor really fully digitized. So one example I want to give you is, of the outcomes of the benefits of this digitization is the ability to investigate quality issues faster by pinpointing at that root cause with more precision, right? Because you digitize workflows, now you have the ability to play back even at what possibly may have happened during that process. You reduce error naturally, but I mean, evidently the operations are hard and many times you still have to do investigations. But now you have precise mechanisms of data identification, lineage, right? And so you can start doing this investigation really much faster. So this is, of course, all possible with automation, digitization, and then this enables people to create faster corrective actions, which is important, right? I remember in my times back many years ago in the manufacturing process myself, right? There were investigations literally that took up to a year to investigate. The reason is that data is everywhere, it's siloed. And when you don't have this automated in a nice flow and you don't have your data strategy, you don't know like, oh, where's my data? What happened here? Who did it? When, right? So to me, that's really an impressive, use case and benefit. And then the other thing, Rachel and Greg, and for the audience, is that access to more data is really unlocking a lot of power in a way that this data is automated and is intelligent and is helping companies to evolve their advanced analytics platform. That's what I hear a lot of customers telling me, like, look, we want to create this advanced analytics platform, but they don't understand that, look, before you create your advanced analytics platform, you have to then gather all of this data from everywhere, right? Automate, and sometimes data don't exist also, Rachel. Data may be unstructured and it's the hardest to interpret. But when you automate all of this, now you get interpretable, intelligent data that now can be put into your knowledge graph, and then insights can be driven out of that. And then the other benefit is developing your talent strategy, right? Especially workers can now execute impact assessments, for example, and quality performance analytics in different ways. But also when workers can do more and be more productive, then they start doing more things in your shop floor, manufacturing, or seeking the next challenge. And so that allows them to grow with the company. And people can spend less time analyzing all of this data manually and instead focus on data-driven way of analytics that helps them become better decision makers faster. That's really, Rachel, what I think about the power of all of these insights and data that is being generated with digitization.
Yeah, I just wrote down a lot of kind of the keywords from your answer. You talked about talent and analytics and innovation and continuous improvement. And it's all part of digital. I think too often we treat each one of these things as separate, AI as well. And I think you just did a really nice overview of what it looks like when we actually treat them all as components of one thing. It's all part of our continuous improvement journey, all part of increasing our quality, increasing our productivity, all of these things that go together. So Greg, what does this look like for you other than kind of some of the quality aspects that we've talked about? What are some of the advantages and the use cases of digitization that you're really seeing day to day?
Although my quality cohorts don't like hearing it, you can't inspect quality into a product. You have to build it into a product. So it all starts at the base level. And one of the things that I'm a big fan of is pictures are worth 1,000 words and videos are worth 1,000 pictures. When I'm trying to fix my dryer at home, I go to YouTube because I can see a video of how to fix it. And I find that much better than trying to read some instructions on how to fix something. So one of the things that I really like about Tulip is you can embed videos into the instructions. And we find that super helpful. We get guys up and trained much quicker because they're using a video as opposed to written instructions and potentially pictures. It also allows somebody who's gone off and worked on a different subassembly to come back to that same subassembly and get up to speed much quicker. You know, if you've been off of a subassembly for a couple of months, you don't remember the fine details per se. And the video allows them to refresh that knowledge and get up and running much quicker with, once again, higher quality, because that's really what it's all about. It allows us to measure assembly times much easier. Previously, we would basically go out and ask the guys, how long does it take to make some subassembly? And of course, they're not paying that much attention. So you get decent data, but not nearly as good as we have now. We're able to see who's working something the fastest, who's building that subassembly the fastest. What are they doing differently that other folks are doing on the line? Allows us to learn from that. And once again, continuous improvement, which is really sort of what my life's all about. And it allows overall production visibility and insight into the production floor. Creates more awareness, understanding the variances of the time between the different guys and taking advantage of that. It allows guidance of the operators, and it also lets us know who's working on what and when, including rework.
Yeah. I actually, Greg, I was talking to one of your app builders last week, and he said that he saw a problem on the floor and thought, how can we solve this using Tulip? You know, how will that let us get the data that we need? How will it let us get the visibility we need? that's music to my ears, of course, but I think it really speaks to kind of the culture around digitization and around continuous improvement as well that you've built with your team. So that was really cool to see. Yuri, my last question is for you before we jump over into some Q&A, which is thinking about this whole conversation based on your experiences. What are your takeaways for companies, big and small, who are starting or even who are, ready to continue and want to dive in further into their digital transformation journeys?
Yeah, certainly, Rachel. I think my recommendation is they need to get started. Sometimes they just feel like overwhelmed with so much technology coming from every corner, and they don't know where to get started. They're like, okay, should I do this alone, right? They still need to develop their culture of innovation, put talent behind this digital transformation. My recommendation is that they shouldn't do it alone. And then they should partner actually with market leaders to help you in your journey. So come to us, come to Microsoft, come to Tulip, in this case for workflow automation, or come to Microsoft for the broader picture of digital transformation. Don't be in panic and just get started. And because the reality is that, look, tech is advancing quite fast. You saw this year what's happening just with the announcement of AI. Now everybody talks AI. AI, maybe your kids at home are talking AI, doing things differently. And you're the plant floor, right? You go to the store and, you are applying AI intelligence. Cameras are watching you. So I think because of these fast advancements, you obviously want to keep the momentum of digital innovation to unlock competitive value. So don't stop with just one use case also. That's my second advice. Or just one MVP. But you actually need to start building your vision for your data strategy, right? And then your AI strategy, and apply all the automation possible that can help you to remove all of those manual processes and things that are repetitive. And then you have to actually find the most critical areas in your function, whether you pick your shop floor or your warehouse or R&D operations or any room in your house of operations. They think this is an opportunity. So you think, you pick that, and then you also think about like which task is your people doing that will return the highest return on investment. And it can be tangible or intangible, right? Just don't stick like, oh, if it doesn't return X number of money, then it's not worth it. Got to think about the big picture. What's the impact for people? What's the impact for quality? And money is coming because now, as Greg mentioned earlier, when you automate, you deliver quality, you deliver consistently to the customers that are expecting products from you. You don't lose your numbers, as Greg was saying, like, oh man, you don't realize really that quality impact is beyond quality. It's really that revenue generation engine of your company. And then I think also you don't need to do it all at once. People also like, okay, all of my operating room here, my manufacturing line is all messed up. I need to fix it all or do nothing. That's also a problem. So you have to think about building a roadmap for opportunities to improve, and then break down those goals into priority buckets to get started. And once you finish a priority number one, you can move to the next one. But never stop refining also your roadmap so that you can continue to leverage the latest and best tech possible for your transformation. Those are my insights and recommendations.
I think that's fantastic. Get going, keep thinking about what is valuable. How do we make this happen? Okay. Thank you both very much. We have some time left for Q&A. Heather, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Yes, we have some great questions. Let's see. Rachel, question for you. Outside of Teledoc, what other success stories have you seen with digital transformation?
Definitely. Let's see. Two customers are really coming to mind that I think also touch on a lot of the things we've been talking about today. One is a life sciences company. They make lab analysis equipment, and they have been using Tulip similarly to Greg and his team at Teledoc for their electronic batch records to keep track of their quality. And one of the key things that they've been able to achieve with that is production visibility. So they can see their orders flowing from inventory all the way through to shipment. And that is really just letting them drive lean improvements. For instance, they were having to throw out a lot of inventory because it was expired. And so they're able to set up a much more robust, first in, first out system. And they have reduced their scrap rate and their trash rate significantly because of that. They've also rolled it out just one app at a time, which has been huge for them in terms of change management, getting people used to digitization and starting to see the value and starting to set up that pathway for exponential growth because it's so accessible and it's letting them train new people as they're hired, both in the specific processes, but then also in terms of the culture that they're building of continuous improvement and digitization. The other company that's coming to mind is discrete manufacturing. So a little bit less regulated than a lot of the life sciences companies that I work with and that we're talking about. But they are a high volume manufacturer, and their goal really when they started with Tulip was to drive their cycle times down from hours to minutes. So really focusing on how can we be more productive? How can we use this data to drive improvements? And very similarly, they've been able to get a lot of visibility into their operations, see what is happening, when and where. They have been using Tulip to build traceability, which is something that is, of course, really important in life sciences as well. And the data they're using both to meet the regulatory requirements, but they're also using it over and over and over again to drive their continuous improvement projects. And that is something that, again, is really feeding into this culture of digitization to improve productivity, build the culture of continuous improvement that they're finding really, really powerful.
Great, thank you. And now, Greg, we've got a question. How do you identify aspects of your operations that you think would be valuable to digitize?
Generally, there are two things I'm looking for. Either something that we want to make more efficient. Classic example would be handwriting down serial numbers versus barcode reading. Not only are you going to save time, but it's going to be far more accurate. So those are typically the two things that we're looking for. We recently had an opportunity down in our Dallas facility with some rework stuff that's coming back from the field that has expiration stuff, parts that expire in it. So we get something back from the customer. Let's say that it went to an apartment building, it didn't show the apartment number, so it comes back to us. So can we reuse those things? Have they expired? Well, we can throw the data in the back of the Tulip app and then scan that material and determine whether the parts have expired or not. So that's an example of where it's an extreme time-saving feature. So we'll continue to look for opportunities over time that will allow us to either be more efficient or we need the data. And that's sort of an example of both there with the rework down here in Dallas. So we'll continue to look for opportunities. The other thing I'd like to mention is programming this is not all that difficult. My guys came up to speed very quickly with this, and it was a matter of weeks to get this up and running, where they learned the back end programming. And typically, what I do is I have a team get together and sort of look at the programming together. So I've got a group of guys that all understand this pretty well, and there was not a lot of time put into learning. So that's another feature that I'm very pleased with about Tulip.
Wow, okay. Thank you for that. And then, Rachel, maybe your opinion here. Yuri mentioned data models and data strategies a few times. Given the flexibility available with Tulip and the democratization nature of app development, does this create challenges with ensuring well-designed and consistent data models?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's definitely an aspect of Tulip that we are continuously improving. Is how do we make it as easy as possible to build apps that scale really well, that meet your needs, that grow, that you can govern sustainably, and that are letting you do the things that you want to do. One of the key ways that we look at this is actually, like Gary mentioned, how do we take, all of the possible things you can do using Tulip, or all of the possible uh, opportunities that you see for improvement on your shop floor, and how do you turn that into an MVP? So what is something that is pretty easy to implement, high value? We all have these projects, and let's start there. Let's start with the projects that are high value, because that will let you build a strong structure for what you're trying to accomplish. It will also let you build the skills to build more complicated things later on in Tulip if you are a newer app builder. And just continuing this process of how do we continue to get value? How do we take the skills and the learnings that we're developing in Tulip and use that when we need them for the more complex projects? Um, on top of that, for the particularly complex ones, we do have a team of solution architects who work with a lot of our customers to make sure that they are building solutions in ways that make sense. And we work really closely with customers, especially when they're building these complex projects, to make sure that we are keeping it as simple as possible. One of the things that I think speaks really well to actually how Greg's team is building up Tulip is when a new person came in, I think a few months ago, he could go into the back end of Tulip, look at what had been built already, and he just understood it. It made sense. So I think that it speaks a lot to aspects of Tulip that make it simple to build intuitively and understand what's going on, and also definitely speak to the skills of Greg's team in building something that is growing with them and really, really meeting their needs, and will continue to do so.
All right, great. Thank you. Super informative. With that, we will wrap up this webinar. If you guys, as we kind of wrap up today, we want to thank everyone for joining, for attending today. We know all your time is valuable. Please check back on our All Up series page for more information later, and you can find the on-demand versions of each webinar in this series. And we want to thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.